2014 World Cup ended with Germany crowned champions for the fourth time after beating Argentina 1-0 in extra time at the Maracanã. With me to look back at the highlights from Brazil are IBTimes chief sports reporter Nick Howson and European football correspondent Eduardo Fernandez-Abascal. Guys, we'll start with the final itself. What did you make of it, and were Germany deserved champions in the end?
Yeah, I think on the night Germany sort of showed the depth that they have. It's not a particularly all-star quality team that perhaps we've seen from previous World Cup winners, but they've got a squad there that they could call upon, and obviously in Mario Götze they could call upon the match winner in the end. The changes they can make throughout the game to sort of change it sort of subtle, albeit subtly, were very influential. And on the other hand, Argentina really weren't able to do the same, sort of bringing sort of either similar players to the ones they already had, or ones that were half fit. So, you know, on the evening, Germany sort of showed that they had a squad capable of winning the World Cup, even if they're, you know, it's not going to be a team that's going to go down in history. Let's not forget that hasn't suddenly changed just with one win. But they certainly showed that they have they can outlast Argentina when they went at full distance.
I think if we just consider the final itself, Argentina probably were better during the 90 minutes. But anyway, I think Germany really deserved to win this World Cup, because during the whole tournament they have been the more consistent team, and also because I think this generation of German players really deserve to win a big tournament. Schweinsteiger, Lahm, or even the new guys like Drasler or Royce. And I think that in the last three big tournaments they struggled against Spain because Spain were outstanding, but anyway they still had chances in the last World Cup and also especially in the European Cup 6 years ago. So yeah, definitely I think Germany really deserved to win this game. And especially because in the extra time, Germany were better than Argentina when Schürrle and Götze came onto the game. Because Argentina coach Abel, I think, failed with the change. The substitute for Argentina, Agüero, Palacio, and Gago, didn't change the game, and Lowe was really good with the change, and I think they make the difference.
Yeah, I mean, didn't necessarily have the players to call upon either. Whereas Jogi Löw sort of had a sort of a depth of talent. You just list the players that didn't even play, weren't even fit, in fact, and it just shows that this Germany team really it was the right timing for them. And they've really, it's a cliche I don't like too much because it's like way overused, but sort of they came of age almost during this tournament. And as you say, they've had so many near misses, semi-finals, beaten in the final in 2008. Semi-final. So, yeah, it was about time that they made this, and unfortunately it came off last night against Argentina's team, as you say, played better probably during the 90 minutes. But you know, I think this tournament's produced is not necessarily all about that. It's about holding a nerve and you know, getting through at the right time, really.
So if Germany was the team of the tournament, then who was the player? We saw in the final that FIFA awarded it to Lionel Messi. Is that deserving?
Certainly not over the whole tournament. Messi was terrific in the group stage and influential in the group stage, and there were one or two instances in the knockout stage when he set up Di Maria against Switzerland, etc., etc. But for me, I think the player of the tournament, what came from the winners wasn't actually nominated for the award because he's a goalkeeper, and that was Manuel Neuer. I thought he looked at times unbeatable in that German goal. Yes, he had a solid defence in front of him, and you know, that's always going to help and always make a goalkeeper's statistics look a little bit better. But such a dominant force, and if you look at the sort of sweeper role that he sort of operated, you know, behind the German back four as well, you know, he's an all-round athlete. He's sort of taking goalkeeping to almost a new level now, in terms of being, you know, very much the 11th man in that team in terms of going forward. You watch Germany corners; he'd sort of be in the D at the edge of near the halfway line. So he really wants to get involved, and he does it every instance. And I thought he was the most consistent performer in a tournament where quality was sporadic among some players. We saw moments of genius from James Rodriguez, but that wasn't consistent throughout all of Colombia's performances necessarily. Yeah, he was terrific, and certainly one of the sort of finds, so to speak, of this World Cup. But yeah, Neuer for me, certainly the most consistent and brilliant with it as well.
Yeah, I agree with Nick. Messi definitely hasn't been the best in the tournament. Probably he was the best in the group stage, but then even Javier Mascherano was more important than him for Argentina. And I think individually, probably James Rodriguez has been the sensation of the tournament, but especially for me, Arjen Robben has been the best player so far during the tournament. But as his semi-final against Argentina, he failed. I would pick probably Manuel Neuer or Philipp Lahm, Toni Kroos, or even Müller, but definitely a German player because they win the tournament, and I think there are 11 players that were consistently better than the rest, but probably Neuer has been the best player of the tournament.
Well, there's one thing this tournament will be remembered for, its goals. 171 scored in total. That equals the record from France '98. But what were your picks of the best strikes, the best headers, just the best goals in general?
I mean, I mentioned Rodriguez against Uruguay, a sensational effort. But sometimes when I'm looking at goals of a particular tournament or season or whatever, so look at goals that perhaps we don't see so very often. Not necessarily the best executed, but certainly the ones that sort of stand out. And I look at Robin van Persie's against Spain.
Yeah.
How often do you see a guy head a crossfield ball from sort of 17, 18 yards out, loop the goal and catch the goalkeeper out? You don't see that goal very often. And I think that's the way I sort of approach these sort of things, because I'm not saying that we see Rodriguez's goal that sort of goal all the time, but it's not unheard of for a player to have done that. And I think the Van Persie goal in some ways, very few you're going to see very, very much like that. I guess the other goal you want to also mention, because of its pure execution, is Tim Cahill's against the Dutch. An unbelievable technique, simple as that. Fantastic goal. And another one, you're not going to see very many of those in your lifetime. Certainly someone will take it with their wrong foot as well.
Yeah, and apart from that, maybe the David Luiz goal in the
Colombia,
against Colombia in the quarterfinal. But probably the nicest goal was the James Rodriguez, but I agree with the Van Persie's goal in the opening game against Spain was unbelievable.
I agree, that was my favourite goal as well. My favourite headed goal in general
Really?
I've ever seen. Yeah.
Okay.
The diving
There's
salmon.
only so much you can get from a header, really.
Exactly, yeah, but that was the perfect headed goal I saw.
As a Spanish, I have to choose the Carles Puyol goal against Germany in the last World Cup.
Yeah, we don't score many headers.
Yeah.
Well, for all our sports coverage, go to our website, ibtimes.co.uk/sport.